Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk Education. In this movie, I want to talk about something that you need to know about that is behind the scenes with Metasploit, and it's called the Metasploit database. And so there are a variety of commands you need to be aware of. You need to know how to enable the database, how to disable the database. That's the focus on this video today. Let's get started. It should be super informative and super fun. All right then, so you can see on my screen here that I have Kali Linux running, and in the background I have pfSense running as my router and my firewall, and I have Metasploit 2 running. Now, for our purposes today, we need to know about a command called system control. And you remember that Linux has services. A service is just a tiny bundle little of code that does some specific job for us. In Linux, they're called daemons, D-A-E-M-O-N. You might hear it pronounced daemon or daemon. You might hear it pronounced services. People that work with Microsoft products a lot will call it a service. But the point is that there's a service out there that's running, and we can stop it, start it, query it, get its status, things like that. Now, the command is system control, S-Y-S-T-E-M-C-T-L, S-Y-S-T-E-M-C-T-L. And I'm going to query the status of PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL. That is the name of the database that is currently running inside Kali Linux, and its purpose is to maintain a database for all of your Metasploit work. So if I hit enter here, it says that the Postgre service, PostgreSQL, this RDBMS stands for relational database management system. Postgre is a very highly thought of database system. It's relational, meaning that we can take two tables and tie them together through some key, and we have certain data in here and certain data in here, and if they're keyed together, we can query that table and get information back about a specific product or item or whatever. So it's called an RDBMS. Postgre isn't the only one in the world. There are some big guys, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, AWS uses RDBMS software, etc. MySQL is an open source version of an RDBMS, just like PostgreSQL. Both MySQL and PostgreSQL are very, very popular because they're not nearly as expensive as something like Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle Server. So it's just saying that it is loaded, and it says that it's inactive and it's dead. So that's the point that we want to make there. We want to get the status, and you'll use system control to do that. Okay, so I'm going to control C out of this. Now, the purpose of the PostgreSQL database is for workspace management. So the concept is I can use Metasploit, and I might have different pen testing jobs that I'm working on. And so I can save each one of those different jobs in a different workspace. So Postgre allows you to create a workspace. You can also keep track of the sessions. So it does what's called persistent session storage. And then you can do efficient searching and reporting with Postgre. So this is the reason why we use a commercial database like that. So let's show some more of these system control commands first, because you're going to do this at the command line. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say system control, and I'm just going to go ahead and stop it. So I'm going to stop PostgreSQL like that. Very easy. These have stop, start, restart, disable. There are certain commands you should look up and be familiar with regard to system control. And we hit enter key, and it requires my password, which of course in this case is Kali. And then if I hit my up arrow again to look at the status now, it'll show, just like it did before, that it's inactive and dead. Now the reason it's that way is because I have not saved my session in Kali. So even though I had Postgre started in a previous session, when I went to kill this like that, I did not save the machine state. Instead, I just powered it off. And what that means then is that it doesn't have that hook into that PostgreSQL service any longer. It's inactive and it's dead. Once you get this going, what I would recommend is that if you're using it in a virtualized environment, you save the machine state so that it remembers that PostgreSQL is running. Okay, now let's go ahead and disable this thing. So I'm going to go System Control. I'm going to say Disable PostgreSQL, like that. And I have to key in my password again. And I could do this using sudo su. Unit PostgreSQL service does not exist. That's great. There's no problem there. Now, if we were to go into Metasploit right now, we would not have the benefit of PostgreSQL, but we really want to have that database in there because it's useful to us. And so we could start Metasploit. In fact, I've got 3 windows open here. I'll go ahead and start Metasploit here. MSF console. And I'll pause for a minute while that gets running. All right, so here's Metasploit running, and it's just fixing to come up. I should get the Metasploit prompt down here in the bottom, and here, of course, is the banner. I'll clear the screen. And there's a Metasploit command called db_status. DB stands for database. db_status. This is a Metasploit command, and what it's telling you is that Postgre is selected, but there's no connection. Now that might imply to you that you could use, say, MySQL or something like that for a database connection instead. By default, it comes with Postgre. But the point here is that we do not currently have a connection to PostgreSQL. So that's the point that we're trying to make here. It's not connected right now. So Metasploit won't work. It won't use the database like we want to use it. Okay, now that we know that Postgre is completely stopped, it's disabled. My whole purpose in doing this was to show you how to use these system control commands to enable and disable, stop, start, restart these different daemons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back in and we're going to actually start this thing. So the first thing we do is we want to start this as root. So we're going to type in sudo system control, and we're going to say start PostgreSQL. Now I just hit the end key. I've done this command before, so the keyboard buffer remembers it, and so it's showing it up there. All you have to do is hit the end key, END, the end key on the keyboard, and it will finish that for you. So it does typing finishing, or whatever they call that, command finishing. So I'm going to start PostgreSQL. So we hit enter. Type in our password for this, and it takes a minute and it begins to start this database. Now this is a relational database management system. This is something that you really need to know. If you're going to get into cybersecurity, you've got to know RDBMSs. They're all over the place. There's a bunch of different brands of them. The technology is pretty specialized, so you should understand how RDBMSs work. Also, you should know the structured query language is called SQL. You should know how to use the SQL language. This is the way that these databases are. Hackers get into the databases. They're able to exfiltrate data. They have a good understanding of the underlying system, and then they have an understanding of the commands that will work to enable them to get into certain tables and exfiltrate data. Now, what we want this thing to do is we want it to auto start. So we've started it now, but we have not made it so that it auto starts at every boot. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hit my up arrow here and get that command back, and instead of starting it now, I'm going to enable it. Now what enable means is that it is going to start every time we start our Kali Linux distro. It's just a part of the thing. So I hit enter, and you can see that it is now started. Creates a symlink for the PostgreSQL service It's pointing to where this thing lives at, and that's all you need to know about that. It's just saying here everything's cool, we're good to go here. Okay, now for our next command. So what we want to do is we want to initialize the database so that it will play in the sandbox with Metasploit. So there's a special command for this. It's MSF Metasploit Framework DB database, and we're going to initialize the database. MSF DB init Microsoft Framework Microsoft Metasploit framework database init, and it will initialize this. Oh, we've got to run it as root. Excuse me. So I'll say sudo. Boom. Database started. The database appears to be configured. Skipping initialization. That doesn't matter to me. What that tells me then is that I have done this one time in the past at least, so it's all ready to go. But it doesn't hurt to run this command just to validate that the Metasploit database has been initialized. All right, now that we've done that, let's jump back into Metasploit and let's do a DB status again. So I'll hit my up arrow, boom, and it queries the database. Yay, that's a good sign. We're connected to Metasploit framework. It's saying that it went out and queried the database. Hey, do you know about Metasploit framework? And it comes back and says, yes, I do. And my connection type is PostgreSQL. That's all very, very good. Now you should be aware when you're doing this, I'm jumping back and forth between these screens just so you can see what I've got going here. You should be aware that this MSFDB command set does both things. So it talks to PostgreSQL and a Metasploit. So it's doing two things at once. It's hooking the two, the application with the database together. And there may be a man page. Let's see if there's a man page for MSFDB, just for giggles and hoots. And there's no man page entry. Let's see if there's an MSFDB tac help. And must be run as root. Clear the screen. Up arrow, and I'll run this as root, sudo, boom, and it gives you the idea of the commands that you need to run to be able to work with the Metasploit database. Now, what happens when the database fails to start? You get some message, the database has failed to start. Well, first of all, you can check system control. So I'll do system control, and I'm going to say status PostgreSQL. That's such a weird name, and the symbol is an element. The symbol is an elephant, and I don't know why. I should research that at some point. But anyway, yeah, they have a symbol that is an elephant, and that's how you can easily recognize PostgreSQL. And it's pronounced gray, G-R, like G-R-A-Y or G-R-E-Y. You'll hear it pronounced PostgreSQL, like there's a second S in there. I like language, so I'm not interested in that second S, so I call it PostgreSQL. Your call, you'll hear it pronounced either way. Okay, now the thing that you want to remember here is if you're having trouble, first of all, you're interfacing between two systems. So you're interfacing between Metasploit and PostgreSQL. Second of all, if that connection is somehow broken, you can query the status of PostgreSQL with this command here, sudo system control status postgre, and find out what's going on. There's another command that you can use, and I'll do a Control-C to get out of here and clear the screen. There is a command called msfdb space reinit, like that. I'm going to run this as sudo, and let's see what that does for us. Type in my Kali password, database dropping database. And this is super good. So I wanted to see this to you. I wanted to explain what's going on here. And this is typical database stuff. So first of all, there are two separate databases going on here. You can see that there's a database called MSF. There's also a database called MSF test. And what these are SQL commands. So it's saying that it's dropping a database called MSF, and it's dropping the database called MSF test. It also dropped a user called MSF, and it deleted the configuration file. Now this file here, you could go out and look at it. You could surf out and take a look at it. In fact, let me show you how you do this. So you grab this code right here. I'm going to right click and copy the selection. I'm going to go into a new Kali terminal window. I'm going to CD into, right click and paste the clipboard. In fact, I don't need to CD, I can do a cat on it instead. That would be just as fine. And hit enter. Now what you're looking at here is what's called YAML. So YAML stands for yet another markup language. It's a lot like HTML, but what it's doing here is it's creating certain sections for the database. And so you don't really need to know a lot about YAML, but it is good to know that YAML is being used here. All right, let me go back here now. Now you can see that it stopped the database, it's starting the database, it created a user called MSF, it created a database called MSF, and it created a database called MSF test, and it created a brand new database.yaml file. And then finally, it initiates what's called the schema. So the schema is a relational database management system idea where we're describing the exact layout of the database and what the database looks like. You can always go get, well, you can't always go get, but database administrators know about a thing called a database map or a database layout. It's the schema of the database. There are commands that can display the schema for you. That's actually very useful if you're in a penetration test, you're trying to do some ethical hacking, and you're looking for the schema of a particular database. Now we can also check the PostgreSQL logs. So I'm going to clear the screen here. I'm going to say sudo, and there's a new command you need to know about. It's called journal control. Journal control. These are the logs that are built whenever a Linux system is running. There's all kinds of different logs. There are logs in place for Postgre. I'm going to put in some switches here, and I'm going to have it tell me what's going on with PostgreSQL. And you get the log output here, and it shows you that different things have happened with regard to PostgreSQL running. Now, if you were troubleshooting, you were still having problems and you couldn't get Postgre to run, there's a couple of other things that you can do. Next, you could also disable the firewall. So now this is all, hey, I'm having trouble getting PostgreSQL to run. Maybe you want to disable the firewall temporarily. The firewall is called UFW. And so I'll clear the screen. And I'm going to say sudo UFW disable. Now I'm not going to disable it. I'm just telling you that there is an embedded firewall inside Debian Linux, and it's called UFW. And so if you are having problems getting this to run, you might try disabling the firewall just to see what's going on. Now suppose that the database is already connected. You could type in db_disconnect, and what that will do is reset the connection. And it's just fine. There's no problem there. That's another way that you can demonstrate that it is working correctly for you. I don't feel the need to do this, but the idea is you can use db_disconnect to disconnect from Metasploit to reset this connection. So these are troubleshooting tips that you can use if you're having a battle with getting Metasploit to talk to PostgreSQL. And really you shouldn't. It's pretty straightforward. Now let's work with Metasploit here. You can see that I have Metasploit loaded, and I'm going to, and I loaded this as root. So I did sudo msf console, which is typically the way that you should run Metasploit of a day. And we talked about the workspaces. So if I type in the word a workspace here, it shows that it's just using the default workspace right now. But you can create new workspaces. So it's very simple. So you say workspace, tac A for add, and let's do test workspace like that, and hit enter. And now if I hit workspace again, it shows that the current active workspace is test_WS. Let's create one more. So I'll hit my up arrow, and I'll create workspace tac A means add test workspace 2. I use the workspace command again, and now I have 3 of them. So how do I switch back and forth? Well, it's pretty easy. If I type in workspace and I tell it that I want to change to WS now, boom, like that, and hit the workspace command again, it has switched to WS. So you can have multiple workspaces going on here. Suppose that I want to delete one of these, like I want to delete number 2. So I do workspace tac D test_WS2, and then I will hit the workspace command, and it is gone. And in fact, I'll clear the screen here because it's getting down towards the bottom. If I type in workspace tac H for help, it shows me all of my workspace commands. And look at that. So there is a capital D, tac capital D. Now, let's talk again real quick about the tac stuff. So this is becoming more and more common. And I think the problem with that they're trying to solve here is that you've got a bunch of lowercase and uppercase letters, and it might be difficult to remember a specific letter, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. So Debian at least has gone to this tac nomenclature here, like tac add, tac delete, tac delete all. And you can see here that tac lowercase d deletes just one workspace name, tac cap d deletes everything. So I think that tac stuff is actually pretty helpful. It's not in every case. You won't experience this everywhere, but you will find that with certain commands, they do support both the single letter option, these are called options, I call them switches, or the double hyphen option as well. So those are both in play here. Now there's some other commands that we can use. So here's another command. I can type in hosts, and it shows me what host is being used right now. It gives me the OS name, the OS flavor, and this output isn't wide enough for me to see very well here. But you can see that if I did have a host that I was connected to, it would show that as well. Also, you can type in services, and it will show you any services that you're currently connected to. And you can export some data. So if I clear the screen, I'm going to type in db export. I'm going to export this as an XML file. I'm going to output this to output.xml. And boom, we've got that. So now if I were to go look at that, I could use that as an XML file for whatever purpose. I could bring it into, say, Excel or Google Sheets or something like that, and I could work with it that way. Most of the Office tools, Google Office, Microsoft Office, natively support importing XML documents. Now keep in mind that we are querying the database at this point. So commands like hosts, services, clear the screen. Suppose that you went into a database somewhere and you exfiltrated some data. Hackers call that loot. It's pretty funny. And so if you type in loot, it's going to tell you what loot you have. Now, the rows that are being returned here, this is called a row return. What's happening here is it's querying the database, it's using a SQL statement, and it's saying, please show me all rows that have loot. And it's displaying these rows beneath here. So if you did have any data in here, it would show immediately below these bars right here. Another thing that you can do is you could type in the word vulns and to see if there are any vulnerabilities that are out there. And there are none, of course, but that's okay. You know that you have these commands. So how do you see all of these commands to see what's available to you? All you need to do is type in help. And Metasploit will give you all kinds of help to show you what's happening here. Now help is a big output file, so there's a lot to know, but I'm going to scroll up to the top here just to see some of the command structures that I can get. And you can see that there are various commands that are provided to me inside Metasploit. So just by typing in help, you can get access to all of these commands that we've been talking about. So it can analyze database information, it can connect to a database, disconnect, export, import. There's a thing called nmap, DBNmap, and that records the output automatically. So let's go ahead and run that now against the Metasploitable box. So keep in mind that what we're doing now is we are inside Metasploit, but this is very cool. We're going to invoke nmap from within Metasploit, and it's going to create a record of that entry for us. So if we type in a db underscore nmap, and it supports all of the nmap switches, so I'm going to just put in a tac capital A, which means all, and I'm going to go out and talk to my Metasploitable 2 box, which is 101, 192.168.1.101, it's going to perform that nmap scan for me, but it is keeping a record now inside the Postgre database of the activity that happened. This is very cool. I'm going to let this run, so I'm going to pause it a minute, let it run, and come back when it's done running. Okay, so now it's done running. It went out and ran all of its nmap stuff. I'm going to clear the screen, and now when I type in hosts, we see that there's a record in the database, and it found the Metasploitable box here. It's kind of clumsy the way the layout is here. It's a little bit wide. I've got the font large so that you can see what's going on, but it's telling you here 192.168.1.101. This is its MAC address right here. It's a Linux machine running 2.6 Ubuntu, and it is a server version. So that's what hosts is doing. So what we did was we ran db_nmap. We told it to go out and query the Metasploitable box. It did, and it wrote a row into the PostgreSQL database showing us what we've got. Now suppose that we wanted to hang on to that. We want to keep that, a backup copy of that. We would simply run the db export command like we did before in an XML file, and it would export all of its database information to an XML file. We could put it on a thumb drive, take somewhere else, look at it with an Excel or Google Sheets or what have you, anything that will look at an XML file. We've already got that. So that's the beautiful part about XML. Now the movie's gone on a little longish. There's a lot more to know about how to use Metasploit with the database. I'll post a link down in the bottom of the movie for you so you can go in and dig in and get even more information. And I think I'm going to call it there, and I hope you've learned a lot about Postgre, about how it integrates with Metasploit, how you can get information out of the Metasploit database. Now, when I shut this down, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this particular implementation here. So I will click Save the Machine State now when I get ready to shut down my Kali Linux distro, and it will save all of this information that I have from before. If I just power off the machine, it's going to lose that information. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this movie. Thank you for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage you that if you're enjoying this movie, you're getting a lot of good out of it, please tell your friends about it that are interested in learning more about cybersecurity. Please like and subscribe to this. I really want to grow the channel and make it get it out to a lot more people. And I really do appreciate you putting in comments. I've gotten some very, very nice comments. Thank you very much. And I just want to wish you guys happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I will talk to you in the next video. Thanks for watching.